All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Monday edition, the President's Day edition, if you will, of the Malzberg panel. And joining us now is the host of the syndicated radio show, The Roger Hedgecock Show, Roger Hedgecock, and founder of Less Government, Seton Motley. And gentlemen, another horrific ISIS video, and of course the beheading of 21 Coptic Christians, not in Syria, not in Iraq, but this time in Libya. They threaten on the video to take Rome, and they also have this to say. Oh, people, recently you've seen us on the hills of Al-Sham, which is greater Syria, chopping off the heads that had been carrying the cross delusion for a long time, filled with spite against Islam and Muslims. And today we are sending another message. Oh, Crusaders, safety for you will be only wishes. So, Roger, first, they bring up the Crusades in the burning Jordanian pilot video. A few days later, Obama brings up the Crusades. Now they bring up the Crusades again. Who's providing the rhetoric to whom?
I think the strategy is preemptive surrender here from the Obama administration. They're going to adopt the ISIS vocabulary in order to have ISIS befuddled as to who the enemy is. And I say that only half sarcastically. Look, Steve, this is a confrontation, an existential confrontation between a 7th century interpretation of Islam, a purification, if you will, going back to the prophet, and the idea that we must bring on the apocalypse, we must conquer the world for Islam. Dar al-Islam is the name of this planet. It's going to be secured for Allah, and we're all going to heaven because of it. That's a pretty formidable ideology to be confronting.
Seton?
Yeah, it's, look, there's nothing in Obama's past that indicated anything other than what we're getting now from his alleged foreign policy. It was in his second autobiography where he said something along the lines of, when the political winds blow badly, I will be with Islam. And he's doing that now, whether it's cutting Israel out of the talks with Iran on nuclear weapons, whether it's allowing ISIS to do anything they want while Jordan and Egypt try to fight them off and deal with them as their particular citizens are beheaded or are burnt alive. It is a complete, I would say it's dysfunctional, but I think there actually is some intent behind what we're getting out of the White House.
And I think it's interesting.
With regard, yeah.
Steve, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to pick up on Seton's point that what we're seeing basically too in that Middle East area is a civil war between Muslims, because countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and a number of others aren't going to buy this extremist worldview, worldwide war view of the new caliphate. They're simply going to fight back against that as real Islam. And the interesting thing today is the Egyptians have already done 2 bombing raids in Benghazi and in its area around that eastern part of Libya, where Obama's policy left us in ruins. And the Egyptians are now having to pick up the fight against the extremists, and they're Muslims.
Yeah, and one more point. While ISIS while Sisi is dealing with ISIS and bombing them after 23 Egyptian Christians are beheaded, Obama's meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood in America and in Egypt.
Well, today's playing golf.
Right, and trying to figure out how to overthrow Sisi, and sending people to Israel, trying to figure out how to, in effect, overthrow Netanyahu.
Right.
Yes. I just like the fact that Sisi's name backwards is ISIS. I think that's a perfect juxtaposition.
Yeah, that is kind of strange. And you brought up a great point, Seton, about cutting Israel. One of you gentlemen, cutting Israel out of the Iran talks. In other words, not keeping them up to date on what's happening. And I believe that the whole goal here is that when Israel has to act after a crummy agreement is signed, Roger, the goal is to just make Israel into the evil monster who destroyed the peace.
Well, that's right. I think this idea of Obama sending his political operatives to set up shop in Tel Aviv to defeat Benjamin Netanyahu in the upcoming Israeli elections on the 28th of March is an obvious, to the world it is now apparent that the President of the United States is going to take on our traditional ally in the Middle East to the detriment of that ally. And with regard to Iran, when I mentioned the civil war between the kind of Sunni nations and ISIS, The fact is, of course, the Shiites, headquartered in Iran, are another element of civil war boiling over there in that cauldron. And I think a successful foreign policy would pit those elements against each other.
Yeah, well, that's the key here. All right, more of the Malzberg panel with Roger and Seton coming up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of issues as we reconvene the Malzberg panel with Roger Hedgecock and Seton Motley. Gentlemen, John Boehner says that if Department of Homeland Security funding runs out, it's the Senate Democrats to blame. I mean, this from a man who blamed Ted Cruz for making him shut down the government, which was the stupidest thing I ever heard anybody say in my life. And of course, you have Mitch McConnell, who promised there'd be no government shutdown right after he won re-election in his victory speech. So my question is, will Boehner and company, will they have the guts to stick to this, defunding the immigration portion of the Homeland Security bill based on Obama's executive order, Seton, or will they eventually cave?
Well, I am not the biggest Boehner fan in the world, but he's right in this instance. Both McConnell and Boehner ran on returning to regular order in Congress. What does that mean? The House passes a bill. The Senate passes whatever version they want. And as we've seen, McConnell gave more amendments on one bill than Reid allowed all last year. So then the Senate passes their version, matches it up with the House version. They go into reconciliation and come up with a bill. Right now, the House has passed a bill, and the Democrats will not allow that version to the floor to then be amended. So he's right. The Democrats are to blame for this. Now, is DHS that important? I don't know. It didn't exist prior to 2003, 2004. If it shuts down, I'm not going to cry any, it's not the entire government. And even when the entire government was shut down, it was 87% open. So in this instance, I'm going to defend Boehner. He's correct. It is the Democrats' fault.
Well,
look, I'm with Boehner on this. But Roger, my question is, do they have the guts, and then do they have the wherewithal to explain this to the public, who will be hearing nothing else from the news media and the Democrats who are guests with the news media, except, oh my God, ISIS is going to come because they think they funded Homeland Security.
See, that's exactly the point. DHS is important as a symbol of protecting the United States. The Republicans will be blamed by the Obama media for shutting it down and exposing all of us to ISIS. That's the way this scenario is going to go. The secret to it and the key to it is McConnell. What he needs to do is to do what Harry Reid did, and that is to drop the nuclear bomb, reduce the 60-vote filibuster need on this appropriations bill. Appropriations should be a simple majority vote. Scale it back to 51. He's got 54 votes. Pass it and send it to the president and make the president take the onus of whether or not to either disband his illegal amnesty or to assign a bill to fund our security. That's politically the way that Mitch McConnell ought to do it. And I'm not a fan of Boehner's either, but I think Mitch McConnell is the guy who needs to act now.
All right, let's move on quickly. Democrats, key Democrats in the House and Senate asking the White House to extend the deadline for signing up for Obamacare. There's some talk about saying the people who would be subject to the tax for not having health care, give them a break as well, because some of the reality is now starting to set in. What about it, Roger? Is Obama going to again change the law unilaterally?
Of course he is. That's what he does. Tiger's not going to change, the spots. But here's the deal on this. Even when you tell people, we're going to fine you if you don't buy the insurance we want you to buy, and then when millions of people don't do it, in fact, a majority of the uninsured have not done it, then you're going to threaten these people with fines and then realize the political backlash is going to be enormous. Right. They're caught in a very big political vice.
Seton, final word. Seton, go ahead.
Very quickly, the way they paid for World War II was by creating withholding. What they're going to do going forward is just start withholding the fine and then returning it to you if you actually did buy insurance during the course of the year.
Good point.
Good point. Gentlemen, great conversation. Happy President's Day. Thank you both very much. Roger Hedgecock and Seton Motley. Okay, folks, when we come back, we played a bit of, earlier in the hour, Newt Gingrich from the Iowa Freedom Summit a few weeks back. But I want you to, this Give Me Five coming up is all about Newt Gingrich's speech on terror and Muslims, the whole thing. So it would be well worth your while to stick around.